I came home after a 16-hour shift that felt like a lifetime. The hallway light flickered when I unlocked the door, one of those small things I kept meaning to fix but never did. My shoes dragged against the wooden floor as I tried not to wake her. The house smelled like lavender and something faintly burnt, probably the candle I'd left too close to the stove this morning. My back ached, my hands trembled, and every step echoed the weight of the day. But when I saw her, everything else fell away. Sophie, my 8-year-old daughter, was curled up on the couch, hair a tangled halo, one arm hanging off the edge. The TV glowed faintly behind her, stuck on some cartoon credits. A soft hum came from her nose, the kind of sound only pure peace makes. I stood there longer than I should have, just watching her breathe. That tiny chest rising and falling, the proof that everything I did, every shift I survived, was worth it. I brushed a strand of hair off her forehead and whispered, "You're safe, baby." Then I slipped into my room, peeled off the uniform that smelled of coffee and antiseptic, and sank into the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed. Once. Then twice. Unknown number. My heart stuttered. Exhaustion vanished, replaced by something cold and sharp. I almost ignored it, but then came the text. "Olivia, we need to talk. It's about Sophie." I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. Who would text me that at this hour? And why did I suddenly feel like everything I'd built was about to crack open? I used to think love could fix everything. Back then, I was 22, working part-time at a diner in Dayton, Ohio. The kind of place where the smell of bacon grease never left your clothes. That's where I met Ethan Miller. He had that kind of charm that made you believe you were the only person in the room. I was too young to know charm was often just a well-practiced mask. He'd sit at the counter every night after his shift at the auto shop, flash me that tired grin and say, "You make this place worth coming to live." 3 months later, we were inseparable. 6 months later, I was pregnant. When I told him, I expected fear, but what I didn't expect was silence. The kind that stretches too long, the kind that tells you everything. He said he needed time. I gave him weeks. Then one morning, I came home to find his closet empty and his note on the counter. "You'll figure it out. You're strong, Liv. I can't do this." I remember holding that note with shaking hands. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but all I could do was sit on the kitchen floor and cry until the sun came up. The next day, I called my parents. Mom's voice cracked with worry. Dad's with disappointment. "Olivia," he said quietly, "we can't keep cleaning up your mistakes." That sentence carved itself into me like a scar. For weeks, I felt like a ghost. I'd walk past the diner, see couples laughing, and feel invisible. Until one night, my grandmother, who lived 2 towns over, called me. Her voice was warm but steady. "Sweetheart, life doesn't stop because someone else dropped the ball. You pick it up. You carry it your way." When I visited her, she handed me a small silver key pendant on a chain. "This belonged to your great-grandmother," she said. Whenever she felt trapped, she wore it to remind herself she held the key. That night, I packed a single suitcase, slipped the necklace around my neck, and left town. I didn't know where I was going, only that I'd never depend on anyone again to save me. I promised my unborn daughter she would never have to feel abandoned, not once. And somehow, even when I was scared out of my mind, that promise kept me moving. The first year after Sophie was born felt like living inside a storm that never stopped. We shared a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Cincinnati, the kind of place where the floorboards creaked and the windows rattled every time a bus passed. I worked nights at a small hospital cafeteria, serving coffee and sandwiches to doctors who barely noticed I existed. But I noticed them. I watched the nurses, the way they moved with confidence, the way their names were spoken with respect. I wanted that. Not for the money, not for the title, but for the feeling that no one could take away what you'd earned. After every shift, when Sophie finally fell asleep, I'd open my old laptop and take online nursing classes. I studied anatomy while the dryer hummed below our floor, reciting medical terms in whispers so I wouldn't wake her. There were nights I cried quietly into my notes, exhaustion mixed with fear. But every morning, when Sophie's tiny hand found mine, I knew I had to keep going. When she was 2, I met Margaret James, the head nurse. She was in her 50s, blunt and brilliant, the kind of woman who could silence a room with one look. One night, she caught me studying during my break. She asked, "You trying to change your life or just keep yourself awake?" I smiled weakly. Maybe both. From then on, Margaret became my silent guardian. She pushed me, corrected me, and on the nights I wanted to quit, she simply said, "Then do it tired." That's what the rest of us did. 3 years later, I passed my nursing exam. I'll never forget the day I got my badge. Olivia Bennett, registered nurse. It wasn't just plastic and laminate, it was freedom. Work grew steady. I transferred to a larger hospital, earned extra shifts, and started saving, small at first, then slowly more. When Ethan's name popped up on my phone once, asking to meet Sophie sometime, I stared at the screen and pressed delete. I didn't know him my piece. By the time Sophie started school, I'd moved us into a modest townhouse in a quiet suburb. She thought we were just getting by. I let her think that. I wanted her to grow up knowing gratitude, not glamour. What no one knew was that I'd also been taking online courses in healthcare administration. And one evening, after Sophie went to bed, I hit submit on a grant application for a pilot wellness program I designed for nurses with burnout. It was a long shot. But 3 months later, the hospital board called me in. I'll never forget the man at the head of the table saying, "Olivia, we're funding it. And we want you to lead it." That's when I realized I'd done it. Quietly, without a single person cheering me on, I'd built something that mattered. Still, I kept it private. My parents thought I was working part-time. Old friends thought I was getting by. I didn't correct them. Some truths are better saved for the right moment. And I had a feeling that moment was coming sooner than I thought. The message kept echoing in my mind long after I read it. "Olivia, we need to talk. It's about Sophie." I barely slept that night. Every sound, the creak of the floor, the hum of the heater, made my chest tighten. By morning, I convinced myself it was a wrong number. Maybe a prank. Maybe just exhaustion playing tricks on me. But around 9 a.m., as I was buttoning up my scrub top for another shift, the doorbell rang. Sophie was still asleep. I walked to the door, heart thudding, and when I opened it, the world seemed to tilt. Ethan, 10 years older, a little grayer, but unmistakably him, standing there with a folded letter in his hand and guilt written across his face. "Hi, Liv," he said softly, eyes darting behind me. She's here, isn't she?" My voice came out sharper than I meant. "You have 10 seconds to tell me why you're at my door." He swallowed. I didn't know where else to go. I messed up, Olivia. I got married. We had a little girl. She's sick. And I can't afford. I stepped back, the pieces falling together like shattered glass. He wasn't here for Sophie. He was here for help. "Don't you dare," I whispered. "Don't you dare bring my daughter into your excuses." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "I just thought maybe you could. You're a nurse, right? You could talk to some people, maybe." That's when another voice cut in from behind him. "Olivia?" My parents. Mom clutched her purse like she was holding on to dignity itself. Dad stood beside her, older but still carrying that same disappointed look I remembered too well. What are you all doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dad cleared his throat. "Ethan reached out to us. He said he needed help and we thought maybe." He looked around the entryway, clearly expecting to see a cramped apartment or a messy living room. Instead, they saw white walls, framed certificates, soft lighting, and a faint scent of jasmine. Sophie's school photos lined the hallway, smiling, happy, thriving. A vase of fresh lilies sat on the marble counter. My mother blinked. "Olivia, this place." I crossed my arms. "This place is mine. Every inch of it. Every bill paid. Every hour worked." Their silence was a kind of music. I motioned toward the wall where a framed plaque hung. "Wellness Program Director. Mercy General Hospital." Ethan's lips parted. You're the director?" I met his gaze steadily.
Yes.
I built a program that helps nurses manage burnout. We're expanding to 3 more hospitals next month. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Dad exhaled, his voice small. We didn't know, Olivia. No, I said quietly. You didn't want to know. You all left me to figure it out alone, and I did. I just stopped sending updates when no one cared to read them. Mom's eyes shimmered. We were scared. We thought you'd fail. We didn't want to watch it happen. I felt something soften, not forgiveness, but understanding. Well, I said, you don't have to watch anymore. You can see what surviving looks like. Ethan lowered his head. Liv, I didn't come to hurt you. I thought maybe you could help. My daughter's sick. I studied him for a long time. The man who once left me with nothing now stood there broken. I'll see what I can do, I said finally. But not for you. For her. He nodded, shame flooding his face. And in that quiet hallway, surrounded by the life they never believed I'd build, I realized something powerful. The girl they left behind didn't just survive. She became someone they'd have to face someday. And that day was now. I made them tea. Not out of obligation. Out of control. When you serve the people who once dismissed you, it changes the air in the room. The kettle hissed softly while my parents sat at the kitchen island, their eyes tracing every polished surface like they were afraid to touch anything. Ethan stood by the window, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, avoiding my gaze. I set the cups down carefully. Let's make something clear, I said, my voice calm but edged with steel. You're here because I allowed it. That doesn't mean you get to stay, or demand, or rewrite the past. Dad nodded slowly, his hands wrapped tight around his cup. We understand. Mom looked down. We just want to make things right, Olivia. Good, I said. Then we'll start with honesty. I turned to Ethan. You said your daughter's sick. I'll use my hospital contacts to help her get evaluated, no promises, but I'll try. That's the extent of my involvement. He opened his mouth to speak, but I lifted a hand. Don't thank me yet. You're going to pay every bill that comes with it. I'm not your savior. I'm just making sure a child doesn't suffer for your choices. He nodded, eyes wet. I'll do whatever you say. I turned to my parents next. And you too, if you want a relationship with me or Sophie, it starts with showing up. No more apologies over the phone. No more pretending we're fine on holidays. I want presence, not pity. Mom's voice broke. We can do that. We want that. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. Then prove it. Sophie has her school recital next Friday. If you're there, on time, sober, supportive, we'll talk again. If not, that's the last time I open this door for any of you. Silence filled the room. The old Olivia would have filled it with nervous laughter, soft words, or excuses. This Olivia let it breathe. Margaret's words echoed in my head. Then do it tired. And maybe I was tired, but this time, I wasn't bending. Ethan cleared his throat. Liv, you really built all this on your own? I smiled faintly, with a lot of exhaustion and a little bit of grace. Dad looked at me like he was seeing his daughter for the first time. We were wrong, he whispered. I shrugged. Maybe. But that's the thing about mistakes, you either learn from them or you repeat them. This is your chance to learn. For the first time, no one argued. No one deflected. The balance had shifted, and they knew it. When they finally left, I stood by the window watching their car pull away. The morning light spilled across the countertop, catching on the silver key pendant around my neck. I ran my fingers over it. Smooth, steady, familiar. I wasn't angry anymore. Just certain. Some debts didn't need repayment, they just needed closure. And in that quiet kitchen, I realized I finally had both. A week passed. The house felt lighter, like it had finally exhaled something it had been holding for years. Sophie's recital was on a Friday evening at the elementary school auditorium. She wore a pale blue dress we'd picked together and a tiny ribbon in her hair. She looked nervous, clutching her violin like it might float away. Mom, will you be watching the whole time? She whispered. Every second, I said, kissing her forehead. As the curtain rose, I took my seat near the middle row, And then I saw them. My parents. Sitting quietly in the back. Dad's hands folded, Mom's eyes red but smiling. No fanfare, no grand gestures, just presence. When Sophie started to play, something inside me cracked open. The same hands that once trembled over unpaid bills now applauded a child who'd never know that version of me. Afterward, Sophie ran into my arms. Did I do good? I laughed through tears. You were perfect. Behind her, Mom approached slowly. She didn't speak, just reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair behind Sophie's ear, the way she used to do with me. Dad gave me a small nod. No speeches. No excuses. Just being there. And somehow that was enough. Later that night, after tucking Sophie into bed, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The moonlight glinted off the silver key pendant resting against my collarbone. I hadn't taken it off in years. I thought about Grandma, her voice, her steady faith that I could make something out of the wreckage. I whispered into the quiet. You were right. I held the key all along. Outside, the neighborhood was still. Inside, everything felt earned. Not perfect, not painless, but real. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Proud of you, kid. Heard the program's going statewide. You did it tired, huh? I smiled. Still am, I typed back. But now it's a good kind of tired. I glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. The day had been long, like so many before it. But this time coming home didn't feel like collapse. It felt like peace. I looked toward Sophie's room, where the faint sound of her breathing filled the dark. And in that moment, I finally understood what it meant to rest. I came home after a 16-hour shift and found my daughter sleeping. Tonight, I come home to the life I built and the woman I became.